Hey, Cornerstone. Okay, so here it is. It's week 5 in a series that we've been calling Bold. And before we get started, though, I just want to remind you, hey, we're regathering again next week. And we just want to invite everybody who feels comfortable to come and be part of it. All of you that are not in that place and are wanting to stay home and be safe, then do that. We're good with all of it. But here's the thing I do want to encourage you to do. We're starting a brand new series, and it's a series on parenting. And I know that some of you say, well, Linn, we've talked about parenting before, but I just want you to know that we've worked really, really hard to have a whole bunch of new content for you this time. You're gonna get something, I guarantee. And I know some of you are saying, well, Linn, wait a minute, I've already messed my kids up, so what's the hope? You're gonna find that there is content within this conversation where you're gonna go, you know what? Hearing that explains maybe even some of the things that are going on in my life, because I'm now hearing and seeing how my parents parented me and how that affects me. Some of us are going to have a chance to lean into the lives of our grandkids and use some techniques that we didn't have when we were parenting the first time ourselves. So guys, I'm just telling you, every one of us wants to be part of it. But here's what I'm asking you to do. Would you invite a friend? Invite somebody who doesn't normally go to church. Here's the really cool thing. Even people who haven't figured out God yet want to raise really, really great kids. This is an amazing opportunity for you to invite someone that you know, either to come physically in person to church or to watch online. Maybe even invite them to come to your living room and watch with you. Let's not miss this opportunity. To leverage a conversation that God is having to be bigger than just Cornerstone and actually to reach out into the lives of the people of our community. So that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm praying that all of us will do. Okay, week 5, series called Bold. And we've been saying all along, it's not always the statement that's bold. Sometimes the statements seem a little bit innocuous or simple, but what's really bold is when you decide to live the statement, when you say that's going to be true in my life. That's the bold thing. So here we go. Bold statement number 5 is simply this. For we live by faith, not by sight. Now, let's just be honest. That's just a little bit weird, right? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, we're supposed to walk around life with our eyes closed and just live by faith. We're not supposed to actually maybe stop and think about things before we do them. We're just supposed to blindly leap off the cliff and just trust that God's going to make. What does it mean when it says we live by faith and not by sight? Here's the reality that happens so often for us. Some of us would live our lives in a way that we would say, hey, I'm just trying to be reasonable. And so you come to a moment, let's say you're buying a car, and you say, I'm just going to think this through. I'm just going to be reasonable in this decision of buying a car. I know just a little while back, I had a car, and I loved the fact that I didn't have any more car payments on it. And then one day, the air conditioning went out. I went to the mechanic, and the mechanic said, your air conditioner has blown up on the inside. Metal shards have gone through the entire air conditioning system. It's going to be $4,000 to clean that all out, redo the whole system for you on the car. And in that moment, I'm just going, well, this just seems crazy. I mean, $4,000, I don't know if it's gonna break down another time this year, but even if it didn't, and I pay $4,000 this year, that's like a $400 car payment. It just seems reasonable. It's probably time to start thinking about another car. And many of us say that's just how I do it. I think it through. Some of us, when it comes to deciding about a job, we would go, well, hey, the pay is reasonable and I like the benefits. There's a great benefit package. And the cool part about it is it means I don't have to relocate. I can stay here and my kids can stay in the same school district. It just seems really reasonable to make that decision. And that's how you and I process life. We just go, I'm gonna do the thing that adds up. When it looks good on paper, then of course that's what I'm gonna do. Some of us would come back and say, no. I live on the faith side of this thing. So when it comes to the car, we go out and buy the car, and then we're talking to a friend, and the friend says, wow, that's quite some car. I mean, how much is that thing costing you a month? And you go, well, it's $1,000 a month. And your friend says, how in the world are you affording $1,000 payment? And the reply is, by faith, by faith. When it comes to a job, All of a sudden you're packing the boxes and getting ready to move to another state, and your neighbor comes over and says, hey, what's going on? You're going, well, hey, I'm moving to another state. We just decided we're done here, we're going. And you're going, well, you quit your job? Yeah, I quit my job. And you're moving to Oklahoma? Yeah, I'm moving to Oklahoma. Do you have a job in Oklahoma? No, we're just moving by faith. And here's what you need to know, that neither of those two are what Scripture is talking about when it says, we walk by faith, not by sight. Neither of those two is a healthy way to live your life. So here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna take the next few moments together, and we're gonna try to demystify this thing of faith and walking by faith and not by sight. Because when we do, I think all of a sudden you're gonna go, oh, I mean, if that's what it is, I might actually be able to do that. But before we begin, here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I want you to pause for a moment. Just think to yourself, what is an area of your life that God's been leaning into recently? An area of your life where he's been saying, hey, this is kind of the next step for you. This is what I want you to do. It may be, hey, there's that person, and every time their name is mentioned, your heart seizes up, and you can feel yourself just the bile rising and getting a little bit angry inside. And there's been a voice in your life that's been saying, I want you to forgive them. And you just, how would that ever work? And why would I ever do that? They've never asked for forgiveness. What? No. And yet, in your soul, you know that God is asking you to, by faith, forgive the person who's hurt you. Maybe it's a job situation. And you're ready to leave, you're ready to quit, you're ready to take off, and you've figured out the whole case and why you got to get out of there. And there's been a small voice inside your heart that says, it's not time to leave. I haven't finished with you yet. It's not done. And God is asking you by faith to hang in there a little bit longer. Maybe it's when Scripture says, hey, that you ought to be dating only Christians. And you think to yourself, I mean, how would that work, right? I mean, what sort of person would I end up with, and would I even be happy with them? Or would God choose some person that I didn't even like, but they were a Christian? And so you've hesitated. Maybe it's trusting God with your future, what your career is gonna be, or what your family is gonna be. And you simply, in that moment, just thought, I can't do that. I can't give that over to him. I can't trust him, have faith in him for that. So here's, what is that thing for you? What is the thing that if you were to have to write it down, you go, I know what it is. I know the thing that God is hoping that I, by faith, will begin to surrender and walk with him in. What's that thing? And here's why I'm asking you to do that. Because I believe in the next few minutes, we're just gonna take faith and unpack it and hopefully demystify it a little bit for us. And that by the time we get to the other end, that you might be able to say, you know what? I could do that. If that's what it means to walk by faith, if that's what it means to step out and trust God, I could do that. And that we may end this conversation with every one of us moving forward in our faith. Okay, here we go. Let's unpack faith just a little bit to try and understand what it is that God's asking us to do. Here's the first thing that you just need to know. The size of my faith doesn't matter. Let me just say that again. The size of my faith doesn't matter. Here's a passage. This is Jesus talking to his disciples. He's been ministering, and they've run into a demon-possessed boy. The disciples have tried to cast the demon out of the young man, and they couldn't do it. And they come to Jesus, and they said, hey, Jesus, why were we not able to cast the demon out of this boy? And Jesus did. And here's how Jesus replied. Jesus replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Now, I can't tell you how many Christians reading that passage misunderstand what Jesus is actually saying. What Jesus is actually saying in that passage is, it's not the size of your faith. He says to them, you ready? If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, that's a mustard seed. And I can't tell you how many Christians reading that passage think to themselves this, well, I've been praying that I would get that job, and it's been 3 weeks and nobody's called me back yet. But I prayed by faith, and Jesus said if I had the faith as a grain of mustard seed, that I would move mountains. So apparently I don't even have that much faith. So I must be a really, really, really crummy Christian. Can I tell you how many Christian gals have prayed and said, hey, God, would you just get that boy to date me? They've prayed with all their heart, believing with all their heart, and he's now dated 2 other girls and he's not even looking at her. And she goes, well, then I must just have crummy little faith. How many times we've said, hey, God, would you give me that promotion? Or, hey, God, would you have my ex-wife get hit by a car? No, I'm teasing. You realize that what Jesus is teaching in the moment is, all you need is a tiny bit of faith. But the faith that is in you is not how faith is measured. Because if you simply had the faith as a grain of mustard seed, it would be enough, you ready? If it was placed in the right thing. If you put your faith in the right person, because faith is measured by not how confident you feel, faith is measured by who you put your faith in. Let me see if this helps. Okay, so I've got some volunteers, and they're gonna come on out. I've got some volunteers. Oh, there we go, okay. And they're gonna come on out. Okay, so this is Lena, right?
Yep.
And you volunteered, or did we just say you're volunteering?
You pretty much told me to do it.
Okay, all right. So I'm thankful that you listen. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. Huge challenge. I'm gonna ask you to, by faith, walk across this board that is all of about like 6 inches off the ground. Okay? So how confident are you that you can probably get to the other end?
Without breaking it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I can do it.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna let you have a try. Go ahead and step up on it.
Okay.
Okay? By faith and all the confidence in the world, walk across the board.
All right.
Apparently, Lena, you are heavier than we thought. Okay, but here's the thing, all right, here's the illustration. Lena had confidence that the board would hold her. Confidence did not change the capacity or the ability of the board. And this is exactly what Jesus was teaching in this moment. That you and I mistakenly put our faith in little things. We put our faith in our finances. We put our faith in our own talent or ability. We put our faith in our education. And what Jesus is saying is that when you trust those things, you have tiny, tiny faith, because those things aren't worthy of your faith. Okay, Lena, here we go. Thank you. You're gonna step to the side. Okay, and then I've got my friend here, and it's Gerard, right?
Yes, sir.
I said that right? Okay, Gerard, we're gonna take the stakes up just a little bit. Okay, we're not gonna do some wimpy little 6-inch board walking across. Lena couldn't do it anyways, okay? All right, we're gonna ask you to do something a little bit more. We're gonna actually have you walk across a board over here, across these 4-foot platforms, okay? So I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and go up the ladder, get up there, get ready, and we're gonna have you walk across the board of death. Okay, but we're gonna add something to this. You're gonna do this blindfolded. Okay, so you're going to take that blindfold. You're going to put the blindfold on. Put it on good. We don't want you peeking and doing all that type of stuff. You're putting on the blindfold. Okay, he's putting on the blindfold. You feeling good about the blindfold?
Yes, sir.
Okay, he's feeling good about the blindfold. All right. Okay, so Jared, if you like to do like a little prayer right now. It starts with, Dear Jesus, help me walk across the board. Okay, there you go. All right. So here's what we're going to have you do. We're going to have you step up onto the board. It's actually a little higher than you imagine, so lift your foot a little bit more than you anticipate because we don't want you to trip and fall off. Okay, there's the board. Get up on the board. Okay, now you're going to turn to your, there you go, turn to your right. Okay. Ooh, whoa, whoa, not too much. Okay, hold on. All right, maybe a little more to the right. All right. And now you're going to make your way blindfolded across the board. But before you do that, how are you feeling about walking across the board?
A little nervous.
Just a little nervous. So you would actually have a lack of faith at this moment. Okay, all right, so faithless Gerard, or little faith Gerard, walk across the board. Oh, Stop. Okay, stop. Go ahead and take the blindfold off. Here's the ladder again. You did amazing, dude. Thank you so much. That was unbelievable. Okay, and then come out here with me for just a second. Okay, so here's what Gerard just showed us. Lena, when she went across the board, was confident. The measure of my faith is not the measure of my confidence. The measure of my faith is how capable, how reliable is the thing I'm putting my faith in. And because Lena put it in a board that could not hold her, it was little faith. When we put it in our finances or our own ability, we are demonstrating little faith. Gerard instead got up here, and not knowing it, we switched the plank on you, dude. And he suddenly is walking across something that looks a little bit like a beam that holds up a house. And even though he was trepidatious, right? Even though he had for himself the slightest amount of confidence, he was never in danger. That board was never going to fail. That's exactly what Jesus is teaching about faith. When you put your confidence, even if that faith is tiny as a grain of mustard seed, if it's in God, the one who is worthy of our faith, then you can move mountains because he is bigger than mountains. Thank you, man. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
You ought to go into ministry, man.
For real.
There you go. All right.
Yes,
Okay. Here's what I want you to consider. If we serve a God who is all powerful and all knowing and who wants our best, think about that. We serve a God who is all powerful and all knowing. He knows our past, he knows exactly the circumstances of our present, and he can see, unlike us, into the future and know exactly what's going to happen. If we serve a God like that who wants our best, then wouldn't it only be reasonable to put our faith in him? And if we did, are you ready for this? That would be big faith, because the size of our faith would be measured by the size of our God, by where we placed our faith. It changes everything about faith. Here's the second thing that you need to know. Faith requires action. Here's the passage. It's in the book of James, and this is James talking to the church, and here's what he says. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? In other words, hey, I believe this, I feel it in my heart, I'm confident as all get out that God could do it, but I don't do anything with it. I never act on it. Can such faith save them? He asks. Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, hey, go in peace, keep warm and be well fed, but you do nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? You ready for this? In the same way, faith by itself, hey, I believe God, I've got confidence in God. If it is not accompanied by action, if it's not acted on, hey, I believe God right up until he asked me not to date that guy. I believed God right until he asked me to trust him with my finances. When I say I believe God and I don't back it by action, Scripture says it is dead. Just be honest. Isn't it fear that causes you and me to pause? I mean, isn't it fear that just says, whoa, wait, that's no longer reasonable. I can't add it up in my mind. I can't understand how that would turn out okay. And suddenly in that moment, we just go, whoa. Faith just became silly. Faith just became unreasonable. If I were to trust God, who knows what God would do with that? And maybe he might even just let me down. And so we hold back. My guess is this. Remember we talked at the beginning, we said, hey, what's that one thing that God's been whispering in your ear and asking you to do? My guess is that the reason you and I have paused, the reason we've hesitated is fear. If I actually trusted God with that, I don't know that I can depend on what he would do. And guys, I'm just going to tell you, this is the answer. This is the reason that so many Christians are stuck. Because there came a moment when God said, hey, this is the next thing. This is what I'm asking you to do. And in that moment, our faith withered. In that moment, our fear overcame, and we just went, I can't. But what did James just say? Faith without action. That pause that I placed in my life is what's caused my faith, my walk, to feel dead. Here's the really cool part. It's actually acting on my faith. It's actually the doing of my faith that ends up removing the fear. So, I'm not saying that it's not fearful going in. I'm just saying that when I begin to act on it, as I begin to step into it, it actually will then begin to remove the fear and the hesitation that I'm experiencing to the point that I can all of a sudden just be confident in trusting and having faith in God. Because faith with action comes alive. Let me see if I can help us with that. So, I don't know about you, but for me, one of the most anxious things to do is to get a repairman, because you're always wondering, are they going to be fair to me? And they know things about what they're repairing that I don't know about the parts, and are they going to be fair, rip me off? And so it's a very anxious moment. So let's just imagine for a moment that your air conditioner's having problems. So you call the air conditioner repairman. And when he comes out, you say to him, look, when you get done repairing my air conditioner, I want to see the parts. I want to see that they're worn out and that they weren't any good anymore. And so sure enough, he repairs your air conditioner. He brings you the parts. And you look at the parts and you go, oh, it's obvious. They were worn out. So you did exactly what you told me you would do. Time go by a little longer, and it's time for your air conditioner to be checked on. And as you call the air conditioner repairman to check your air conditioner, you think to yourself, this is just the perfect opportunity for him to just find 5 things that really aren't wrong with my air conditioning and come back and, jack up my bill. Sure enough, though, he comes back after checking your air conditioner and he says, hey, your air conditioner is perfectly fine. Doesn't cost anything except the check today. And you think to yourself, man, this guy must be honest. He could have so easily told me there was something wrong. Now it's a little bit later and something is really going wrong with your air conditioner. You call the air conditioner repairman out and you say to him, I don't know, but it sounds horrible. I'm guessing it's the compressor. And what you and I know is if it's the compressor, it's thousands of dollars, right? It's expensive, it's the compressor. So you sit there with kind of clenched fist and he comes back a few minutes later and says, hey, good news. It's not the compressor. It was actually the condenser. And instead of being $1,200, it's $80. And you, with absolute joy, write that $80 check for the condenser. Now it's a year later. You call the air conditioning repair guy out again, and this time he says to you, it's the compressor. And when he does, you ready for this? When he says it's the compressor, you have confidence. Why? Because he showed you the parts. Because when he came out for the check, he didn't rip you off. Because when you thought it was the compressor, he actually told you it was just the condenser. And so now you have learned how to rely on his truthfulness and honesty. And so now when he says the compressor, you're pretty sure it's the compressor. So now you're talking to one of your friends and you tell them the story. Hey, last week I had to replace my compressor. And your friend says to you, are you sure? Are you sure the repairman's not ripping you off? And you say, no. Let me tell you a story about the faithfulness of the repairman so that I am confident when he told me it was a big deal, it really was a big deal. This is how it works with God. See, there's going to be that moment in which God comes to you and asks you to do something. You ready? By faith. That's going to feel really, really scary. And in the moment, you're going to go, it just makes no sense. So he says to you, hey, I want you to forgive that person who hurt you. And you just think, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And you ready? But you decide to act on faith, scared and all. You put your lack of confidence, that little bit of confidence, in a God who is worthy of your confidence, and you forgive the person who hurt you, and suddenly your heart is overwhelmed with peace. It's almost as if chains fall off of you. You begin to treat that person different, and you ready for this? And they actually seeing the difference in you come to you and say, hey, can we talk? And you think, wow, this whole walking by faith thing's pretty cool. But now you come to the next moment that's full of fear. And in this moment, God says, hey, your marriage right now that's struggling and you guys aren't too happy with each other, here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I'm gonna ask you to submit your needs below the needs of your spouse. Ephesians chapter 5, submitting one to another. I'm gonna ask you to take your wants and I'm gonna ask you just to be an amazing wife. I'm gonna ask you just to be an amazing husband, whether or not they take care of their part. And so you go home and you say, I don't know how this is gonna work, but by faith, you ready? By faith, you just simply say, okay. And so you start reaching out, doing little things, just being kind to your spouse. And all of a sudden you see a heart absolutely and suddenly there's a joy that comes back into your marriage, and suddenly your spouse is now reciprocating by doing things for you. And you just think, man, this faith thing works. And then it gets a little harder. You're sitting in service one day and somebody talks about a ministry that we're doing in India and how there's orphans that need some support, and there's pastors who don't have money to be able to live, and something tugs at your heart even though you don't have a lot of resources at the time, and you just feel compelled to write a check, and because God has been faithful so far, you write that check. And 6 months later, you hear a report back from India that they've taken the offering that you and I by faith gave, and that hundreds and hundreds of people have come to Christ, that orphans were fed, and that pastors were taken care of. And you just simply go, wow. If I hadn't stepped into faith, I would not be enjoying this blessing right now. And then comes the moment that God says, tithe. And then you look back and remember the God who has been faithful. And this thing that would have been so filled with fear for you no longer is filled with fear, because, you ready? The God who was worthy of my faith and the God who has come through with my faith has removed my fear, because I now have confidence in him. It's actually the acting on faith that removes the fear from faith. The more steps we take by faith, the less fearful faith becomes. Remember at the beginning we talked about the person who was being reasonable, who took the job because the job added up, who sold the car and bought a new car because it all made sense, And we talked about the person who said, hey, I'm walking by faith, and I just, I quit my job, and now I'm moving to Oklahoma, and I don't have a job there, but I'm just doing it by faith. Or, hey, I bought the car I can't possibly afford, but I'm doing it by faith. We said, look, neither of those is. Neither of those is walking by faith and not by sight. Because here's the deal. I've made 100 decisions in my life that were reasonable, that turned out wrong. And you know why this wasn't walking by faith? Because I never prayed. I never prayed and said, hey, God, this makes sense to me, but you're the God who loves me and the God who not only sees my present circumstances, but sees how that job is going to turn out. You're the God who sees how that car and how much a burden it's going to be if I lose my job. And so I choose by faith to pray about something that in my own heart makes perfect sense and not to move until you tell me I should move. I am going to walk this moment by faith. On the other side, faith is not taking a dumb idea. Faith is not quitting your job and moving to Oklahoma when you don't have a job, rubbing a little faith on it and calling it God. That's not what it is. Faith is not getting a car payment. You have no business getting a car payment, rubbing a little faith on it and saying God is in it. That's not faith. Faith, you ready? Faith is when God gives me a command that doesn't seem reasonable, that doesn't add up. Only date this type of person. Stay in that marriage that's struggling. Love your enemy. And that in that moment I obey the command of God that by all human terms makes no sense. By faith, I act and live out my faith. Remember at the beginning, I asked you, what's the one thing? What's the one thing you're holding back? What's the thing that you know in your heart God said, hey, this is next. This is the thing I'm asking you to do, the person I'm asking you to forgive, the area of your life I'm asking you to trust me for, and you've paused. What if the outcome doesn't depend on how confident you are? What if the outcome depends on how big your God is? Wouldn't that make it easier? And what if staying where you are means that your faith will wither and that the only way forward is to act, to simply say, God, I don't know how this turns out. I have to be honest, I'm fearful about how it turns out, but I choose, you ready? By faith, to obey you in an area that I cannot see by sight and understand. And I choose in this moment to give it to you. And I wonder what your life would look like when you have a whole line of faith stories to tell. Let's pray. Dear God, I get it. There's no part of this walking by faith and not by sight that comes intuitively or naturally for us. And yet the reality of it is, God, that this is the Christian walk. It's not depending on my capabilities or my resources. It's saying my God is bigger than whatever problem, whatever fear I'm having right now. And he deserves my faith. It's the size of my God and not the size of my ability that I depend on. God, I just ask for every one of us who in that moment when we asked, what is that thing that's holding you back? What is that step that God's been asking you to take? And we knew what it was. Man, our hearts brought it right up. And I'm just gonna pray that every last one of us in this moment right now would pray and say, God, it's yours. I'm gonna trust you for my dating life. I'm gonna trust you for my finances. I'm gonna trust you for my future. I'm gonna trust you for my marriage that's in trouble. I'm gonna have faith and I'm gonna walk in that faith and not by sight. And that God, you would come and show yourself to be real. This is my prayer In Jesus' name, amen.